This is the Ancient and Medieval History Lecture for Thursday, the 10th of February, 2022, and we are on the subject of Christianity. We talked about John the Baptist and about Jesus' temptations in the wilderness, and how these temptations basically prefigured Jesus' approach to his ministry, that he would not use his power to dominate or to serve himself, or as a showy magic fireworks display, or to acquire political or economic power. That was not how he was going to do this. Instead, he was going to approach his ministry in a different way, which I've got to tell you about when I can give it my full attention. What?
Uh-oh.
Golly, golly. Let's try this again. Yeah. Okay. That. As long as you're willing to buy me a new one, Dan.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay.
I can give you an old tablet I got when I was like 6.
I'm sure that will be fun to throw at bears and moose and things. No, please don't hit me with the light electric device. No.
And I've dropped that thing over 20 times and it's still not cracked. So.
That's good. Does it work though?
Yes. Just don't remember the password.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Jesus is instead going to approach people really the opposite way that the Pharaoh Akhenaten did. The Pharaoh was a ruler who tried convincing people to become monotheists. Jesus was nobody special in terms of politics. Akhenaten had tens of thousands of soldiers and tens of thousands of priests and bureaucrats. Jesus had a bunch of guys, a dozen or more, who stayed with him. And they were fishermen, and they were, one was a revolutionary, and one was a tax collector, and these were not the beautiful people. These were not the elite. And Jesus worked not on the basis of compulsion, which the Pharaoh did. You will follow my policy. You will worship my new God. Why? Because I'm the Pharaoh. Jesus never did that. He invited people. He exhorted people. He encouraged people. He didn't tell people, you must choose me. Never. You ever have a thought that's sort of like Quicksilver? You try grabbing it, it just scoops. That's the way my mind is working this morning. So hopefully this will work. In fact, here, got the thought for the moment. Jesus not only didn't tell people to follow him, he didn't make it seem wonderful. He was not a good advertising man. Try the new Coke. It's better than the old Coke. Try our new product. It's the Sham Wow. It sucks up an entire soda spilled on the counter. Sham Wow. Yes. Yeah, New Coke stank. And therefore it tanked.
Yeah.
Because New Coke was basically Pepsi.
Yeah.
I hate Pepsi. If I have to drink a cola, I want something that takes the rust off battleships. And that's old Coke. I mean, really old Coke has cocaine in it. But that was 100 and more years ago. The Coke I remember just had a lot of caffeine and sugar.
I
Yeah.
have a fun fact about that. So, when Coca-Cola and Pepsi were made, they actually are supposed to taste the same because Coke is supposed to be drank warm and not cold, and Pepsi is supposed to be drank cold. And so, if you drink Coke warm and Pepsi cold, they taste the same.
Oh, no! That violates a basic dualism in my life. Look, they originally sold soda at drugstores because it was considered to be a medication because it helped move gas. among other things in your body. So people would actually go to the drugstore to get not only soda, but ice cream. Ice cream was sold with soda at drugstore counters. It's weird. Then again, they used to have X-ray machines where you could look at your feet. You just walk in and try some shoes on, go up to the X-ray machine, and you can see the skeletons of your bones crunched by this. And it was only later that they discovered things like radiation and radiation poisoning and things like that.
Some little kid's gonna try to see his whole.
Oh, of course they did. Of course they did. And they therefore got massive X-ray doses. I mean, to this day, when you go to the dentist and have your teeth X-rayed,
I just did.
yeah, that's fun. I've got one coming up. Yay! What does the tech do? They leave you in there with the conch in your mouth, and then they put on a lead vest, and they go behind what should be a shielding wall. It's not because a single.
Vest on you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at least.
Okay, yeah, they probably do. I try not to remember what goes on at the dentist.
They just went into a completely different room.
Yeah, they do that because they're doing it all day, and they don't want to be overdosed on the X-rays. But yeah, you're right. They do put it on us. But in the old days, they used to just do it for fun. You'd have an X-ray machine at a carnival, so kids would go in. What does your skull look like? Hey, I saw Johnny's skull. He's got a cat. In any event, what does this have to do with Jesus? It made sense. It made sense. He sees to the heart of your soul, just like an X-ray. In any case, I hate having these things. Yeah, Jesus did not encourage people to follow him because it would be easy. He told the rich guy to give up all his property. He said, take up a cross and follow me. So this is the opposite. Advertising. I went to X-rays through advertising. An advertiser, because of New Coke, an advertiser will try to encourage you to use their product by making it seem like the bestest thing ever. Jesus didn't say that. He said, if you follow me, look at what happens to me. And I'm the founder of this religion. Think about what they're going to do to you. So it's like recruiting for the Marines. There was a recruiting day at my old high school, and they start with the Army guy. Be all that you can be in the Army. That was the slogan back then. And the Army guy talked about money for college and all the various jobs you could do that had civilian applications. Then the Navy guy, and the Navy guy talked all about the equipment that were on ships and all the technical training you could have, and that once you were in the Navy, you were set for life because you had marketable skills. And then the Air Force guy came, and of course the Air Force, the most technical, cushy of the military services. And how they only wanted the smartest of the smart, which is true, because Air Force. And then the Marine walks up. And he stands there and he looks at the entire population of the school. And he says, there are probably no more than 20 of you that would even have what it took to begin Marine basic training. If you want to join something that's accessible, go with these other guys. Otherwise, we don't want to hear you from you. I screwed that up. God, what is wrong with me today?
Just take a minute and breathe.
No, I'm not going to take a minute and breathe. Breathing is for weak, sissy losers. No, I'm not doing that.
Don't breathe.
I didn't sleep well for 2 nights. That's why. No, basically, the Marines says, most of you don't even waste my time. He basically dared everyone to even think about talking to him, let alone becoming a Marine. So, of course, the toughest guys went right to the Marine guy because the Marine guy challenged them. Jesus does the same sort of thing. He challenges people. He doesn't say, it's going to be easy. We have cookies. There are puppies. We have safe space rooms. No, it's hard. You're going to give up your wealth. You're going to be scorned by the world. Take up your cross and follow me. That was just for you. Okay. You who are watching on YouTube, yes, I am a horrible teacher. See. Jesus fulfills 4 basic roles. Remember, the Jews were expecting a warrior, a king, a wizard, and a judge. The Jews were expecting a warrior, a king, a wizard, and a judge. I like that. I'm going to write that down. Warrior, king, wizard, judge. Okay. The Messiah was supposed to usher in the day of the Lord, doomsday, judgment day, and everything would change. Jesus is none of these things on earth. He's not a warrior. The angriest he gets, he turns over some tables. He becomes a king after he's resurrected, but he's not a king in this world. He even says, my kingdom is not of this world. Yeah, he does some miracles, but they're not, for the most part, the kind of gee whiz, kazam pow, lightning bolt, fireball sort of, conspicuous, flashy miracles. And while Jesus says the judgment is coming, Jesus does not. In fact, there's a famous story. One of the ways the Jews were allowed to kill is by stoning.
Oh, God.
So you find a woman who's guilty of adultery, and you prove it. So what's going to happen? Well, she's going to go into a pit, and everyone who feels like it shows up at the pit at the right time, and they wing rocks at her until she dies.
That sounds horrible.
It is. It's a horrible, horrible thing. Do you know the story?
Yeah, so
Okay.
Jesus is there when they're about to stone her, and he walks up and he's like, you guys shouldn't do this. And they're like, well, she's an adulterer, we got to. It's like what
It's
we
the
do.
law.
And then he's like, well, those of you who haven't sinned can throw the first stone. And one by one, everyone just kind of drops it and walks away.
Yeah. He who is without sin cast the first stone. Now, I'll tell you, there are people in the world who are completely shameless. And they wouldn't care. They'd go, yeah, fine. Bam, 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 bam. Because they just want to throw stones so much that they don't care that they're hypocritical, lying hypocrites and liars. Hypocrites lie a lot. It doesn't matter to them. They have no shame. But in that moment, either it was the charisma of Jesus or just the truth of the saying, everyone was honest. And they dropped their rocks and they walked away. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Leave judgment to God. This is what Jesus says. So, he's sort of a judge after he dies and is resurrected. But on this earth, no, he doesn't go around damning people. It's not his thing. So if Jesus isn't a warrior, king, wizard, and judge, what is he? Well, first of all, he's a teacher. Actually, he's the best teacher if you're a Christian, because what Jesus is teaching is how to be a good person. Moses brought 10 commandments. Jesus has 2. And what they do is they sum up what the 10 commandments are supposed to mean. But instead of it being thou shalt not, which is most of the 10 commandments, except for honor your father and your mother, thou shalt not is the majority of the commandments. Jesus says, number 1, love God above all things. Okay. As a Christian, I'm supposed to love God more than I love my wife. And I try to. And I love my wife very, very much. But your first loyalty as a Christian is supposed to be to God. Love God above all things, and with all your power. With all that is in you. With your whole mind, soul, heart, and strength. Now, if you're having difficulty imagining what this means, loving God, it means being honest, among other things. Not tricking yourself, not lying yourself, not playing games. When you've done wrong, admitting you've done wrong to yourself and to others. Loving the truth. You're not the truth. I'm not the truth. If you're a monotheist, if you're a believer, God's the truth. So love God above all things. Second commandment of Jesus. Oh God, this is a tough one. Love your neighbor as yourself. So this is an affirmative commandment to love. Not to honor, like honor your father and your mother. To love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had some pretty obnoxious neighbors over the years. I mean, really annoying, bad. I can't believe these people. How could they play that music that loud at 2 in the morning?
Oh, that's
Just like this.
Yeah. or this one. This is actually 2 years ago. Tina and I just moved to our new house in a new neighborhood, and it was the Sunday before 4th of July. And the family at the end of the street was setting off some fireworks. Fine. It's the Sunday night before. It's full dark, so it's like 10:30 p.m. And then they take out their bunker busters. I'm talking about fireworks so loud that they shook our house. It really felt like we were under artillery fire. And the first one goes off, and Tina jumps out of bed, and I jump out of it. What the heck? And then we say, okay, fine, they did that one. They're not going to do that again. And then we relax, and then 10 minutes later, the next thing I know, I'm in my bathrobe, in my slippers, out in the street saying, how much longer? What? How much longer? 10 minutes. Fine. Hey, dude, calm down. I'm not dude. Not when I'm like that. Calm down. Actually, the women in their family got them to stop right away, which is nice. Oh, God. How inconsiderate. I can understand doing that on the 4th of July, but it's a Sunday night. You know what that means? It's a work night for most people. And every molecule in my body, yes.
Yeah, we got a new speaker, like a really good speaker recently. My dad said, my neighbors listen to really good music, whether they like it or not.
A, I get it. B, I'm glad that I don't live near you. No, I like music fine. I love music, in fact. You will hear me play all sorts of music in here, but not at the wrong time of day. I actually like quiet.
Yeah, my dad doesn't like play music or anything, but I don't know. I found that joke like really funny.
Oh, it's incredibly funny. Look, I used to feel the same way. When I first started driving, I would always play my stereo loud in the summertime with the windows down, just because I wanted to share my wonderful music. That actually was going on in my mind. In any event, love your neighbor as yourself. The nasty, obnoxious, evil part of me said, what if you hate yourself? What if you're psychotic? What if you're mentally ill and you want to destroy yourself? But no.
Yeah. I think
That is obviously what Jesus meant. What Jesus meant was treat people around you like you'd like to be treated. And the thing about love, I'm suicidal. The thing about love is, yes, I really did that. It's okay. It was a joke. It was a lecture tool. And if you see me get killed by lightning, you'll know I went too far. Okay? Really, not trying to mess up your message. If you are loving someone, there is no limit to it. You can fulfill the duties of respecting someone, or of honoring someone, or being dutiful to someone, or being loyal to someone. But love has no limit. Love goes on and on and on. So what Jesus is asking in these two commandments is something actually harder than the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are about, avoiding evil for the most part. Jesus' commandments are to love God and to love each other. And people are mighty unlovely sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And there are times when people are just furious at God. Death and grief, often. You get angry at God for doing this. So, hard commandments teach you Okay, second role. Jesus is a healer. He goes around, and nobody's, I'm talking everyday people that don't have any status, they figure out this is some kind of holy man. And what holy men do in the Middle East is they heal. So they've got boils, they come to Jesus. They've got a stomach problem, they come to Jesus. This one woman who's bled hemorrhaged for 20 years comes to Jesus, but she's not a Jew. Still, in the crowd, she manages to get close to him and she just touches him. And she believes that just touching this holy man will heal her. Well, the story goes, Jesus feels power flow out of him. And he turns around and says, who did that? Who touched me? And this woman comes up and says, I did. She's not bleeding anymore. And Jesus said, you're not a Jew. I believe anyway. One shouldn't let one's children starve and feed the dogs. But your belief has healed you. Now, there are two things going on in this miracle. One, it's the belief of the person that Jesus has the power to heal that actually does the healing. It's a miraculous thing. She's hemorrhaged for 20 years, 20 whatever, and now she's not. Secondly, maybe Jesus isn't just here for the Jews. Because in the end, he approves of this woman's solid faith, incredible faith. She could not have been healed without that faith. And that is one of the early indications that maybe Jesus is here not just for Jews, but for all people. There's the case of the leper. Leprosy was a terror. It still is. There is still leprosy in the world. It's a disease that rots you from the outside in. Body parts fall off. You lose your sensation of touch. A person with leprosy has to learn to do visual self-examinations with a mirror. They have to visually check every inch of skin on their body. Because once leprosy advances to a certain point, your nervous system doesn't work the way it should. You don't feel pain. And if you don't feel pain, you don't know you've been injured. And if you don't know you've been injured, you get infected and die. And in the case of leprosy, as it advances, inevitably, your fingers fall off, your toes fall. It's a horror. I mean, stoning is preferable to leprosy in my mind. It's just awful, an awful way to die. The island of Molokai in Hawaii has still on it a leper colony. There are still people who have leprosy who go there and try to be treated. It's an awful disease. So, in the ancient world, if you had leprosy, which was more common in the Middle East than it is in Europe or here, thank God that it's not as common here, you would announce your presence by wearing certain clothing, or by wearing a sign, or by wearing a bell, or by wearing a symbol, or by shouting as you approach groups of people. Leper, outcast, unclean. Leper, outcast, unclean. So that everyone knew to get away. Because people didn't know how leprosy was spread. It is communicable. So, a leper comes to Jesus, which involves a lot of guts on the leper's part, because often people, if they see a leper in their midst and they're not ready for it, will throw stones until the leper goes away. They're not going to be subtle about it. They're going to get out of here. You think people got scary with COVID? Leprosy is so much worse. I mean, it's just visceral, primal fear. So a leper comes to Jesus when he's doing healing. And Jesus heals him. And Jesus tells him a few things. Don't tell anyone I did this. If you tell people I did this, it's going to make trouble. I'm doing this for you. Go to the priests in a few days. The priests will check you out. You won't have leprosy anymore, and you'll get to come back to live with other people Again, you won't have to be off in the leper colony. And the priests did do inspections to see who had leprosy and who didn't. And every so often, there's a rare occasion where somebody with leprosy gets better. So this guy does what Jesus says for a while, and then he goes to the priests, and they say he wasn't. And of course, the guy isn't quiet about it. Jesus has just saved his life. It's like a guy who's been blind his whole life, and Jesus gives him his eyesight back. So what is this healing about? Well, first of all, it shows that God is concerned with our individual suffering. God is concerned with our personal pain. That it's not irrelevant to him. The Greeks, even the Greeks that thought about monotheism before Jesus, the Greeks believed that God is this perfect engineer. And a perfect engineer doesn't care about flawed mistakes. So the Greeks believed, when they were monotheists before Christians, that there was a God and that he was this perfect being that would have nothing to do with scuzzy imperfect beings like us. Well, Jesus, no, not like that. Jesus takes an interest in people's pain, and he tries stopping it. Number one. Number two, what he's demonstrating is that God is more powerful than leprosy. God is more powerful than blindness. God is more powerful than a bleeding that will not stop. God is more powerful than any of these worldly curses. The greatest of Jesus' miracles is talked about in the Gospel of John. It's the story of Jesus' friend, Lazarus. Now, Lazarus lived in Bethany near Jerusalem. Lazarus was wealthy. Lazarus had sisters, Mary and Martha. Jesus stayed with Lazarus on several occasions. There are a number of stories about Mary and Martha. Jesus gets word from one of the sisters, or both of the sisters. Lazarus is dying. Please come. Jesus doesn't come right away. When he does come, the funeral is already going on. The mourners are rending their cloth and crying to the heavens. And one of the sisters comes out and says, Master, I'm sorry that you couldn't come sooner, because I know if you had come sooner, Lazarus would have been saved. This is one of the occasions where Jesus cries out and weeps in the misery of this. This was a friend of his. This is his sister saying to Jesus, had you come sooner, almost it's your fault. So Jesus asks to be shown where Lazarus is. Lazarus is in a tomb. Jesus wants to see Lazarus. So they open the tomb, which is not an easy thing to do, by the way. Jesus walks in, and the body is on a slab wrapped in a cloth, a funeral shroud, like what Penelope was weaving for Odysseus. Lazarus, awake! Lazarus, arise! People outside are looking, what the heck? This guy's dead several days. His body has begun to decompose. There is an odor. This isn't the case of somebody who looked dead and you found out they were really still alive. This is somebody who was dead, according to every indication. Not only was he not breathing, not only was there no blood flowing, but again, the skin changed color and had begun to have that fragrance of death. And then somebody hears the sound of something moving inside, and Jesus steps back, and out comes Lazarus. So Jesus actually brings a dead man back to life. Story goes. One would argue, wow, why doesn't he do this more? Why does anyone need to die? Look, it's not just about Lazarus. When Jesus does miracles, it is an indication of something. There's a lesson, there's a message. The lesson and message here is that God is more powerful than death. He's not just more powerful than disease. He's not just more powerful than insanity, which they blamed on demons. God is more powerful than death. God can command a dead man to rise. And this is a foreshadowing of Jesus' own resurrection, which was soon to come. So it wasn't just about raising all sorts of people from the dead. Sometimes dead is better, believe it or not. It's about a sign, showing something. So Jesus is a teacher, Jesus is a healer, but Jesus is also a revelation. A lot of people can read the Old Testament and they can see a God of righteous judgment and anger. How dare you abuse this life that I have given you? How dare you abuse the choices that you have? How dare you choose evil? One of the first stories in the Old Testament of Abraham, in Abraham's time, Abraham's relative Lot goes to live in the city of Sodom. And the city of Sodom has not given its name to a certain variant of homosexuality for no reason. Sodom wasn't just known for its male-on-male homosexuality. Sodom was known as a place where people would be raped by groups because no one could hold the people of Sodom back. A couple of angels go visiting Abraham's relative Lot. And there are crowds outside saying, "We want those beautiful men. Give them to us." So this is bad, okay? This is not a good place to live. So God is going to punish Sodom by wiping it off the face of the earth. And Abraham prays to God for mercy. If I find 100 men who are righteous in Sodom, will you spare the city? And God says, yes. If I find 50 men who are right, yes. If I find 10 men who are righteous, yes. Lot learns that he'd better leave now with his family. The angel tells Lot not to look back, tell his people not to look back. They flee the city in the middle of the night. There's a great flash in the sky, and the wife of Lot looks back because she's curious, see? And the story goes that she is immediately converted to a pillar of salt. Now, what we think is that Sodom and Gomorrah were where the Dead Sea is now. And the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea because it's a blasted wasteland. One natural possibility is that there may have been a meteor strike that actually hit the earth there or almost hit the earth there. And when a meteor comes that close to the earth and it's big enough, there is a hydrogen bomb level explosion. And you could be turned to ash in it. So that area looks like it was hit by a meteor. It looks like it's been hit by an H-bomb. And the story in the Bible is because the people were so vile that God had to say enough. And they were wiped out. And there weren't 10 righteous men in the entire place. That's a scary God. It is. Yes.
Aren't there like salt pillars also in the Dead Sea?
Yes,
that
there
they
are.
call the wife of Lot?
Yes, there are. Very good. The Dead Sea is one of these places that has so much salt. It has 3 or 4 times the amount of salt in any amount of seawater. So if you go to the Dead Sea to go swimming, diving is very difficult because salt gives you buoyancy. This is why if whales and dolphins go into brackish or fresh water, they usually die. Because a whale or a dolphin is built to survive and balance and swim freely in salt water with a certain amount of buoyancy. But if they go into fresh water, that buoyancy is gone. They go to the bottom, and the thing about whales and dolphins is they're air-breathing mammals, and they can get no air, so they die. The Dead Sea is practically a poisonous place. It's not a place that has a lot of life. It's called the Dead Sea for a reason. But there are resorts around the Dead Sea today. But if you try going swimming there, it's very hard to go underwater and stay underwater. It is so, so very salty. And it's possible that the level of the Dead Sea was higher or lower. The Dead Sea is also, I think, close to a mile below sea level. So it's weird because you've got all the air pressure that you're not normally going to get on the surface of the Earth because you're significantly below sea level. So things are just weird around the Dead Sea. They're also weird around the Sea of Galilee. It's also below sea level. Anyway, Jesus, if you look at his life is a revelation as to what God is. God has his moments of anger. Jesus has his moments of anger. But God cares. God heals. God offers salvation. God is willing to spend time and effort on everyday people. There's an old saying I heard from a liberation theologian once. I disagree with his theology, but he said, God must love poor people. He's made so many of them. If you look at Jesus' life, he is supposed to show you what Christians believe God is like. Not an angry God of judgment only, but a loving God. This is a story from the Gospel of Mark. It's put on my tie in sort of a stained glass window manner. Jesus is met by a blind man. The blind man has been blind all his life. Now, the Gospel of Mark is the earliest gospel, as you'll see. And what Jesus does is when he accepts the job of dealing with his blindness, he makes spit. And he spits in the mud, and he rubs around the spittle and the mud, and then he takes bits of mud from his spit and places it over the man's eyes. And when the mud is removed, the man can see. It's like there were opaque fish scales over the man's eyes, and the scales fall away. I was blind, and now I can see. Why would God do something like that? And the answer is sympathy, love. So Jesus is a revelation of what God might be, and it's a much more hopeful picture than an angry judge. Finally, Jesus is a sacrifice. Mahatma Gandhi, the great lawyer who led the Satyagraha movement in India, the movement of nonviolent resistance against British rule, once famously said, "There are many causes for which I am willing to die. There are no causes for which I am willing to kill." Gandhi preached nonviolence. He got that from Tolstoy, who got that from Christ. Martin Luther got it from Gandhi and Tolstoy. Nonviolent resistance, moral authority. So, what the Jews expected of their Messiah was a conquering hero that would bring the Gentiles under Jewish control, that would punish the evil and the wicked. Jesus, instead, allows himself to be arrested, allows himself, if you believe that he is all-powerful magic son of God, to be put on trial by the priests and by Pontius Pilate. He goes back and forth to Herod Antipas and then back to Pilate. He is condemned unrighteously. Spoiler alert for all of this. He then has to walk the Via Dolorosa. Via Dolorosa is Latin for the road of suffering. when I was growing up, we did something on Good Friday called the Stations of the Cross. Good Friday was the day that Jesus was crucified. So we would gather in church, and along the outer edge of the church, there were a series of icons, statues, holy pictures. And what you do is, when you do the Stations of the Cross on Good Friday, you go through the Via Dolorosa with Jesus, from the time he picks up the cross, and he's taking it through, and then he stumbles and falls and has to pick it up, and then they get Simon from Cyrenacia to help him, and basically his whole story as he is walking this telephone pole of a cross. Telephone poles are heavy. From Pilate's praetorium out to Golgotha, the place of execution outside the walls of Jerusalem. So what I did as a young Catholic was we went through the Stations of the Cross, remembering all of the details of the suffering that Jesus goes through. And then when he arrives at Golgotha, it's not like he gets to rest. They stretch him out, and they strap him and nail him to a cross, and then they raise him up and drop him in to the hole and put a sign up, here lies the King of the Jews. Behold, the King of the Jews. Why would God do that? Why would God let himself be defeated? If it was a Marvel movie, Captain America would throw his mighty shield. Iron Man would go and give somebody a real punch. Thor would whack somebody with Mjolnir. Jesus accepts condemnation and crucifixion. Why? There's a book by a Greek named Nikos Kazantzakis called The Last Temptation of Christ, which was made into a movie back in the 1980s. You're going to see a clip from it in a few days. I had to walk through protesters to see this movie, because the protesters thought that it was unrighteous and blasphemous, because it wasn't based on the Gospels. Kazantzakis wrote the book, and I don't think it's a bad book myself. It may not be for you. He wrote the book because he was wrestling with issues of faith. And so in Kazantzakis' book, Jesus is not perfect. Jesus has weaknesses. Jesus is a man. God made flesh, all that. And he's tempted, not just in the wilderness, but throughout his ministry. And there he is hanging on the cross. And the adversary comes to him and says, okay, you've proven your point. You don't need to do this anymore. You've proven your point. You've proven that you were willing to suffer for people. You've proven your point. You've done enough. Now, magic yourself down from the cross and go live with Mary Magdalene as your wife. In fact, you'll do that for a few years. And then Mary Magdalene will die. So then go live with Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, and they'll be your wives. And Jesus experiences this vision of being what he never was, a father, a husband, with grandchildren. But he never died on the cross. Without him dying on the cross, the world isn't saved. So he goes back to the cross. He does not wish himself off the cross. He resists the last temptation to save himself. And in doing so, he saves the world. The little gospel from the book of John, chapter 3, verse 14. And God so loved the world, he sent his only begotten Son to die, so that we might have eternal life. The simplified version, and I would be happy if some of you would want to talk about this and use your own understanding. But as I understand it, God made people He made Adam and Eve, he made them with free will, but he also made them blessed and without sin. Eve, then Adam, chooses to sin. This creates a barrier between us and God. A barrier. No sympathy. And God, throughout history, is trying to teach a small group of people how to find their way back to God. Because he wants them to come back. And this is what Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and David and all of that is all about. Jesus dies for our sins. What that means is that if you realize that you have done something horrible, and you think it's an unforgivable thing, maybe it's a horrible thing. Maybe by logic it should be unforgivable, but it's not. Christians don't believe it is. You recognize that 2,000 years ago, he died on the cross so that you would have a way back. In other words, if you accept the gift of salvation, it's already been paid for. It was paid for 2,000 years ago on a cross. It's not a question of earning your way into heaven. You can't. It's a question of accepting the free gift of salvation paid for by Jesus on the cross. That sacrifice opens up the path of sympathy once again between man and God. That's my way of explaining it. Again, I'm not a priest. I'm not a minister. I'm just a history teacher. And there are many different ways of looking at it. But Jesus, Christians believe, is a sacrifice. His death on the cross did mean something. What it means is that we are no longer defined by the original sin of Eve. We are no longer defined by our sins. There is a way back. And that way back is through love and forgiveness and trusting God. Does anyone have any thoughts or ideas on this?
I've kind of struggled with that idea of, like, if Jesus was so good, then why did he have to die? But, like, the way I've come to look at it is that there's still evil in the world, even though Jesus came to save us. And by him going up on the cross, he's kind of an example. But by his resurrection as well, it's, like, kind of a representation of us. If we sin, we can, like, if you're Catholic or whatever religion you believe in, you can, well, mostly Christian or Catholic, you can go to God, and he will forgive you, and you'll be able to go to heaven. And God always forgives and loves you, and that's kind of represented through Jesus' sacrifice.
Yes, because, again, love has no limits. Jesus didn't just do a symbolic thing and call it a day. He stayed up there until he died. Luckily, the spear piece pierced his heart, and he only had 3 hours of it. And then he was dead. And he was dead from 3 p.m. Friday until somewhere Sunday morning. This matters. I once struggled with this too, and I said, does Jesus really need to die? Is the resurrection that important? And it is. Because the resurrection demonstrates that death is no barrier. That God is stronger than death. You had one?
Yeah, and there's a little kind of fun history fact. So, like, historians have kind of, like, looked at the stars and stuff, and they estimate that when the Bible says that when Jesus died, it all went dark, there was an eclipse that day, and so that's why people felt like the power, and the eclipse was kind of almost a symbolic thing.
Absolutely.
Kind of explained through science
and
the Bible.
Yeah. Well, look, if you've been paying attention, I try to do that very thing. I do believe in miracles, but I don't think that God has to violate the rules of science to do it all the time. I think that miracles can be a result of something wondrous that doesn't require magic. For example, there's a story where huge numbers of people are following Jesus into the wilderness, and he's preaching and preaching and preaching. And he looks at the disciples as it's getting, towards the end of the day, and he says, feed them. Sir, feed them. It's not like we have a giant caravan of food. Feed them. So bring forward what you have. And it's something like 5 loaves and 3 fishes, or 5 fishes and 3 loaves. It depends. There are actually 2 versions of the story. And so people bring forth a very limited number of loaves of bread and a few little fish, and he feeds thousands of people with them. So either Jesus went copy-paste to the fish and to the loaves, which is possible. I mean, he's God, magic. Or it's possible that as people came forward, they brought what they each had on them. And that the miracle of the loaves and fishes was that Jesus inspires everyone to give up all the food that they were carrying on them to share. And because everyone comes forward and shares all the food, everyone eats. And if you know how people are about their snacks, that's actually serious. That is not a violation of the miracle of the story. It's a way of explaining it. And to me, explaining a miracle doesn't mean you're demystifying it. What you're doing is you're showing how God can work through everyday things. In any event, Jesus is not warrior, king, wizard, and judge. He is teacher, healer, revelation, and sacrifice. Next time, we'll talk about the 4 books of the Bible, the New Testament, that deal with Jesus, the Gospels. Thank you for your attention and your participation. We're done.